next conversation is a debate. The debate topic is, do the deal. Nonprofit M&As are a viable pathway to scale in India. And so like all debates, there's a for and against, and the participants on stage are going to be representing one of those sides. But before we start, as Krishnan said, and for those of you guys who were here yesterday, please pull out your phones. There is a poll. Because like all debates, we need to figure out whether or not, number one, the audience feels a certain way. And so if you go to the app, there's a live feed. Yes? And there is a poll, live polls, excuse me. Yes, and it's a simple question. Priyanka will read it.
Do we need non-profit M&As to solve India's development issues?
Thank you. M&As is mergers and acquisitions. So we've been having quite a few conversations yesterday, today, throughout the year actually, around collaboration. And mergers and acquisitions is, of course, a form of collaboration. And so today, the participants on stage will actually debating this particular topic. And before they start, we'd like you guys to actually vote. We're not going to show the results of that vote until after the debate, where we're going to have you vote again. So then we'll figure out which side actually wins the debate. So Geetanjali is saying her side. I just want to make this clear. It's a debate. It's humorous. It's entertaining. Like every single issue in this world, there's always a gray area. But we've made it very clear to these participants, we want black and white. We want arguments. We want it to be engaging for everyone here, which is why we're keeping the lights on, because after you voted, you should not be SMSing or doing other emailing. You should be participating on really which side wins the debate. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the participants.
Yeah, before Arun starts off, I just want to share a secret.
Thank you.
This lady here, Geetanjali, is so keen on winning, so she's offered me a bribe. So if we lose, please, it is not for lack of belief.
And did you accept the bribe?
Yes, yes. I am a good Guju.
This reminds me of a speech that the former Deputy Prime Minister of the UK gave when he was resigning for Margaret Thatcher's cabinet. He said working with her was something like going into bat in the final of the World Cup only to find your captain has broken your bat. So thank you, Pravin.
Yes.
Now
okay. You make us win.
Yeah. So I'm going to speak for the motion. I'm going to speak from experience of Save the Children, having been in the space of mergers and acquisitions in the UK and in Australia. But more importantly, in 2009, 30 Save the Children members around the world decided to merge into a single operational entity. That was, within the sector, I think, the single largest one-time Big Bang merger. I'm going to talk about why it's important for our sector in order to grow, to innovate, working together, and they've all talked about collaboration, and I know you have been talking about it yesterday also. Collaboration is a very used and abused word. There's collaboration and there is collaboration. It's important in the not-for-profit sector, whether you want to call it CSR, whether you want to call it philanthropy or NGOs, we're all part of that. We're important, but times are tough. The operating environment, whether in this country or in rest of Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, and increasingly, as I see it, in Europe and North America, is becoming tough. Beneficiaries, customers, clients, whatever you want to call them, face a fragmented system in future. So if you've got, as we were discussing as a panel earlier, if you've got cancer and you need a variety of services, you have to go to a variety of organizations. There isn't necessarily a single organization or a single place, single window you can go to. Donors are increasingly wanting to decrease their transaction costs. They do not want to see the kind of competition and the competitive advantage that we talk about within the sector instead of collaborative advantage within the sector, they don't want to see that. They want to see us working together. And so I think it is in the interest of the delivery to our beneficiaries, clients, customers, whatever you want to call them, for better and more effective services. You know, we saw the Dasra mission on the screen a few minutes ago. So if you want to deliver it, you've got to work together, and Dasra has shown that over the years. And that working together doesn't just always mean working in loose networks and alliances, which are important. Collaboration is of various kinds. But we do believe from our experience, and I'm going to talk about the two particular ones I'll talk about is when 30 Save the Children organizations came together. This was in 2009. As a result, we brought in 15,000 staff in 54 countries together into one single entity. We brought in programs worth $1.6 billion into one single entity. And the key purpose was, how are we going to deliver better for children? That was the driver for this. This wasn't just about saving money. That was the key part of it, that we become more effective, more efficient, that the value for money is there, that we're delivering more for the same amount of resources that are being invested in us by our supporters and donors. It has its challenges also, so I'm not going to say it is all, you know, very easy. But if you plan it, you work out what the risks are, you manage those risks, you have a strategy, you focus on people, it can be done. And I think what we have shown from 2009 to today, in the last 9 years, is this entity that we have created as Save the Children International works. We also did a merger, an integration with Merlin, which is a UK-based health organization with 3,000 staff and programs in over 20 countries. And that was about leveraging the expertise of Merlin. It wasn't just about, you know, you take over a smaller organization. This was not, unlike in the corporate sector, this is not about buying something. This is about working together within a strategy. So my argument here is that mergers do work. They are of much larger benefit to the people who need our support. Thank you.
Thanks, Arun. Very good points. And while I agree that if the organizations, they want to scale and they want to optimize resources, if they want to achieve economies of scale, they need to work together. But unlike the for-profit sector, we have something beautiful here, #collaborative action. In NGO world, we all work on collaborations. So I don't think we need to acquire or merge with an organization. Like you talked about example of cancer, right? So earlier I used to work for Childline. Childline is in every district of India, and it's a small organization. Childline India Foundation is a small organization, and they have expanded and moved into new geographies very fast by partnering with existing organizations on the ground. So it helps you, you know, you don't have to go through the heartache and the headache of merger acquiring an organization, but it still allows you to scale very fast if you are working in partnerships. So you are able to, if I need to enter a new area all on my own, I will need to understand the geography, I need to understand the people, but when I'm partnering with an organization which already exists, I can move very fast. I can take their knowledge, I can give my expertise, and together we can work very effectively. Like the example of cancer, so again I'll come back to that. In Childline, what we had, that we have a Childline partner in the field, and if a child needs cancer support, or if the child needs medicine support, education support, rescue, they can just go to one Childline, and who can provide all these facilities. So you need to understand that how we can leverage what already is there. Now, currently I'm in ARMMAN, and ARMMAN, again, we were able to reach out to 1 lakh women within a span of a year in Mumbai. by only partnering with organizations who were there. We did not acquire anyone, we did not merge with anyone, but we gave the technical skills, we used the inroads, the partners gave us the gateway to the beneficiaries we could reach to, and we were able to achieve what we wanted. So I feel while mergers and acquisitions might be a great idea for profit world, in non-profit we have so many other options which have been extremely effective and proven. So I am totally against the motion.
You know, I read somewhere that in the US last year, there was 1.5% of the entities in the for-profit sector did mergers. And the same number was applicable to non-profits as well. So obviously, I mean, there is no disagreement that it is a tough process. I mean, I don't think that, but that should not stop us from looking at options that make sense for a particular kind of services that you deliver. Now, you know, I have been in the investing world, and even in the investing world, it's been a tough task to get entrepreneurs together, to work with each other, to do mergers and acquisition. But there generally, there are two big arguments. What is my value? And my, you know, I am smarter than you and hence I should be the CEO, etc., etc. But once you cross that hurdle of value, because in the non-profit, there is really no value benefit that anybody derives when you merge. So it boils down to people. Now, if we believe that there is a common vision, one can argue that, you know, people say something and do something else. All that is, you know, we are argumentative Indians. We can always figure out why not to do something. But I'd like to believe, and you know, this is my sort of early days in the world of serious involvement in the world of philanthropy. And this is my target, to figure out what are the processes that we can make, whether it's geography, you focus on geography that will make it work, whether it is cancer being one example, are there perhaps non-ideological based services that you can actually optimize by creating a merger. Now, collaboration, I have nothing against collaboration, and that's a great idea. So some will work with collaboration, but that does not rule out, because economies of scale you can't get through collaboration in the real sense. You can't also find the other talent to be part of your organization. And those are important, and you perhaps can present a better case to your donors if you were a single organization. So there is nothing wrong with collaboration, but some of the collaboration can lead to a merger. Word acquisition I don't like, because, you know, that's a kind of a very for-profit word. But, you know, I think if we give people dignity when you do mergers, and give them the right role, whether it's a big guys merging with small guys or so on and so forth, it just can help you increase your footprint, increase your impact, and hopefully get a lot more money out of donors.
Thank you.
Sure.
So Deval gave us the question to debate on, is mergers a viable option in India to try and reach scale? You know, I worked in the profit world in another generation 20 years back, and I participated in mergers and acquisitions. And the biggest companies in the world merge, right? For example, if I worked in healthcare for a long time, Glaxo and SmithKline merge, and they're called GlaxoSmithKline. So I'm going to ask you, let's think of the largest organization in India, in the non-profit world, and see if you all think it's viable for them to merge. So the two biggest I know actually are Tata Trust and Reliance Foundation. Does anyone here think they can merge? So I suppose that's why I feel they're not viable to merge in India, and mergers and acquisitions don't work. I didn't even see one hand being raised. I mean, this is the first time I've asked a question on stage, and everyone seems to be aligned, not even one person saying, no, I think they can merge, right? So, and maybe you can, you had some thoughts about why they didn't merge, and I'll go through why I think mergers may not work in India and they are not viable. So if you really look at it, there are three types of non-profit organizations. There are foundations, there are CSR organizations, and there are NGOs, right? And if you look at foundations, the reason I think you said that they won't merge is that they are run by industrialists who all have their own goals. They would like their name to be known as that they run this foundation, and they don't want to merge. The same actually is true of CSR organizations. So the bulk of CSR organizations, roughly, in the old days, industrialists or entrepreneurs would have factories. Around their factories, they would do CSR so that they get to know the community well. And therefore, they build trust with the communities and the business flourishes, right? And you have two CSR organizations. Again, they're not going to merge. They have their own themes. They want their name to be known in those areas, and that's how it works. You look at the third category, NGOs. NGOs in general, if you again look at the history of India, have been started by charismatic leaders. You know, I won't say all, but many of them believe they are the best to do what they are doing, and they have high egos. And asking them to merge, guys, it's not going to happen. So that's why I feel that in all these areas, asking for mergers and acquisitions to be a viable option, I think it's great, it should happen. But is it viable? I don't think it's very viable to say it'll happen, except for the few examples that our colleagues pointed about, Save the Children. But that may be 1 in a million or 1 in 1,000. So I'm skeptical of the viability of this. But I just want to step back and even move away from viable and say, is it even required, and does it work in India's context? So I'm going to use two frames, right? The first frame is, why do mergers really take place? Or actually, let me use the second frame first. Is it even required? And let's take the corporate world, and I'll give you the reason mergers are really critical in the corporate world is that two organizations in the same area don't collaborate. They only compete. So again, if I go back to the example I've used of Glaxo and SmithKline, they are going to compete in the marketplace. They are not going to say, let's get together and try and serve the customer. But in the non-profit world, it works exactly the opposite. You know, as my friend Geetanjali said, she collaborated with so many people who all have the same goal. If I look at my own foundation, Gates Foundation, we make lots of grants, and when we make grants, the typical way a grant is made, a consortium of players come together, and they bid for a project. And they think nothing about coming together. They all have sometimes the same skills, sometimes complementary skills. They put together a package and come together. Now, let me give you the opposite example in the private sector world. I think the biggest success in the last decade or 2 decades in the private world has been the software industry, right? Look at any, and now these software firms get $1 billion deals, $5 billion deals when they compete for taking over the infrastructure or doing the software for large banks or large companies. I can't think of one, even a $10 billion deals where they put together a consortium. It's, you know, Satyam will bid on its own, Infi will bid on its own, whatever, Mahindra Tech will bid on its own. So the collaborative model just doesn't work in the non-profit sector, in the profit sector, whereas it works in the non-profit sector. So I'd even make the case, do you even need mergers and acquisitions when there's a clear model of collaboration? So that's one frame I'll use. The second frame I'll use is why do non-profits have, so maybe I won't go to the second frame because I've run out of time.
Stop.
I'll do it later on. But I think I'll rest my case here. Thank you so much.
I thought we were talking about the collaboration or mergers of non-profit world. I don't think, I mean, you know, the example of Ambani and Tata marrying each other. If Ratan Tata had a son and Ambani had a daughter, I am sure they'll figure out a way to merge. But that's not the issue here, and I take exception to your view that, see, again, I think we are not trying to suggest that every NGO must merge, okay? There is, I mean, and in the for-profit world, and I come from the software industry, there have been successful integrations, and they have worked, and they have become bigger and better. Was the job easy? Of course not. Is it doable in India in the non-profit? There is a lot of work to be done outside of, you know, getting people to meet each other and even agree. There are legal issues, there are, you know, many things to explore, but I mean, I'm just putting a case that, you know, we can argue for the sake of argument, if something is very difficult, so let's not look at it, and the options that are available here today work. That shouldn't prove that the mergers don't work, okay? And I think that, you know, all we have to do is to look at sector by sector and see whether the idea of merger applies. Because at the end of the day, we want to solve the problem. I don't think merger is for the sake of building an entity, oh, that I have a very large NGO. It is to resolve some issues, and if that merger can help resolve those issues, you know, we should take a look at it and go find the solutions. If we can't, inshallah.
Thanks, Pravin. So in certain cases, yes, mergers and acquisitions will work. Maybe sometimes it makes sense also, say a small organization which doesn't have a second line and does great work, but will die after the founder is gone. The organization will close. The beneficiaries will not get the benefits they were getting from it. Of course, in such a situation, acquiring or merging with another organization or that being acquired by somebody else works. But who's going to fund this cost? We as NGOs, we know. To get money for a communication person, to do anything for institution building is such a nightmare to get any kind of funding. And when you're trying to merge with an organization, there's a long drawn process. You need to do the due diligence, you will be looking at, so when you're doing collaboration, then also you do due diligence, but in a merger, it is a very detailed level of understanding the organization, mission alignment, vision alignment, processes. After you have acquired the organization, probably brand building, lot of costs are involved. I do not know how many funders are here, but if you are, how many of you will be ready to fund this process? Yay. I'm coming for that then, I'll remember. So that cost itself, I think, is pretty daunting. But as Pravin Bhai said, that in certain cases, yes, it makes sense. Like suppose if I'm a person who is running homes. So yeah, in that case, it might make sense. But frankly, I still feel the cost involved, the challenges involved, especially when we have a better option of partnerships and collaborations, I would go that way. But of course, the things need to be looked at case-to-case basis, but still, collaboration is the way to go.
Yeah, Geetanjali, I think you made the case for us for saying, you know, if you plan well, you look at where the synergies are, you get the resources to do it properly, this can happen. And so, you know, come back to the example that I gave earlier. So in the case of Save the Children in Merlin, the UK government actually gave us the resources to do the planning, to bring the two organizations together in a way that would deliver better and give better value for money to taxpayers, the UK taxpayers. So there are examples, and while I admit it's only, as Pravin said, only 1.5% of the sector, and most of it has been in UK, Europe, North America, I haven't seen that much in Asia or Africa. But I think we should learn from that where it has been successful, and there have been cases where there hasn't been success. And that has primarily been because you don't plan it well. You know, the vision isn't there, the common vision isn't there, but it's also about planning and bringing the people along. Because every organization, all the work that we do is about the people. So well planned, well resourced, it can work.
So, you know, I have no doubt that well done, well resourced, it can work. And I'm sure it will work in 5 cases in India or 10 cases in India, but is it likely to work and scale? And I'm going to ask one more question. based on what my colleague said, which is that Save the Children merged because UK government gave them funds to merge or to do the process. So I'm going to ask you, how many of you feel the Indian government is going to give money for 2 NGOs to merge in India? Okay, again I have 0 hands up. Oh, sorry, 1 hand up. Okay, 1 in 100. So 1% feel that the Indian government's going to give it. So or maybe 200, whatever. So I think it's a great idea to merge. I wish more firms would merge in India in the non-profit world, but I'm just saying it's not viable. Again, both the questions, 0 or 1 out of 100, 200, really thought it could work. Now, I said I'll talk of 2 frames. I spoke of 1, and I'm going to speak of the second frame as to why I think it's not viable. And that frame is really, why does it work in the profit sector? Not about competition and collaboration, but another frame. And why it won't work in the non-profit sector. I think it works in the profit sector because people want to maximize the value of the company, the value of their shares, by either increasing revenue or cutting costs, and I'll just focus on the cost cutting. If you cut costs, profits increase, you merge people, you rationalize, blah, 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 and things go up. But despite that, if you really see, when 2 companies merge, and I've gone through these examples when I worked in the profit sector, when 2 companies merge, actually you can call it a merger, but broadly it's always a takeover. One CEO and 1 second line more or less are delegated or leave the firm, et cetera, et cetera. And actually all the negotiations are not so much about maximizing value, but everyone realizes that some folks will be out of the job, and they negotiate an exit package, and often the CEO gets tens of millions of dollars, and that's why mergers and acquisitions take place. I'm simplifying, but roughly this is my understanding of mergers and acquisitions. Now, is this viable in the non-profit sector? Which the CEO is going to leave? Is he going to get $10 million? Where is he going to get $10 million from? So I think it's really unviable to expect that mergers are going to happen at scale in the non-profit sector. Everyone is concerned about themselves, and that's why it happens in the profit sector, and that's why it's unlikely to happen in the non-profit sector. The second thing, look at costs in general. In the profit sector, you squeeze out costs. I think trying to squeeze out costs in the non-profit sector is completely the wrong model. In any case, the non-profit sector is hugely underpaid. I mean, trying to say you want to reduce their salaries or do other things, just not going to happen, and I think it's the wrong model. So that's why I feel this is not viable in the non-profit sector. I would agree fully with my colleagues that a few deals will happen. And if it happened, it would be great, but I don't think it's viable as a route to scale, and it will transform the industry in India in the non-profit sector. Thank you.
And not even needed, actually.
Okay, so we're going to open it up for questions, but before that, I want you guys to go back to the app, and we will tell you which questions you need to answer.
There are 2 questions. The
She
first,
won. Because she's delivered the money.
So the
Of course
first
it
is,
was done electronically.
do we need non-profit M&As to solve India's development issue post-session? And the other question is, which team argued its points most effectively?
And we're going to open it up for questions. So while you guys are answering these polls, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. And if you don't have a question, I will call upon people to ask questions.
When you're talking about, I think we have the first, we're kind of jumping the gun here. The first conversations that need to be had probably are, between the from this, the biggest organizations kind of came from the Vinoba Bhave movement and the, JP movement. And so there are a lot of organizations that are committed to those values and are driven by those values. And there is also newer generation of professional kind of organizations in the development sector. And there are serious issues of how do we get to where we get to, what are the structural and causes of poverty, and so where do we plug our interventions, etc. So there are serious and deep discussions that one needs to have with leaders, with thought leaders on both sides before we can strategize in terms of and even use terms like mergers, etc. in the development sector. And I think, especially in these times when ignoring the structural aspects is kind of, I think, driving solutions which are looking at branches and leaves rather than the roots. So we should, I think, spend a little bit of time to have deeper conversations with thought leaders on all sides. Thanks.
Okay, so that was a comment. If anyone has questions, that would be fantastic, because it's still a debate, and this may influence votes to the debate. There's a question over there.
Oh.
And sorry, there's one on top. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Hi, I just wanted to know if anyone had thoughts on intermediaries in the M&A space. What we see in the for-profit sector is that the M&A space seems to be dominated by, say, the legal community or people in financial services who have lots to gain from big M&A deals, and very often it's the tail that wags the dog. So if M&A became a thing in the non-profit sector, is it likely that we'll have these sorts of intermediaries, and indeed powerful intermediaries, emerge in this sector? And would they likely to have the same values, which is to sort of look out for their own interest in it and the interest of their firms, etc.? Or could this new class of intermediaries be seen to have a different set of values, where indeed they're also outcomes focused and they're focused on really not the cost squeezing and all of those aspects, but really reversing those processes and actually creating a professional ecosystem wherein these mergers could take place without stakeholders really losing out?
Okay, if I could try and answer that. So from my experience, yeah, the intermediaries that played a key role in the couple of examples that I gave were the same as you would find in a corporate merger. The big law firms, the big accountants, the PwCs and Ernst & Youngs were there. But I think there's a second kind of intermediary that was key to the success, which is about, the lady at the back who made the comment about thought leaders and getting the vision together. That was the starting point here. And the intermediaries who help you think through that are really, really important. Due diligence, making sure that legally what you're doing is kosher, it's watertight, it'll stand up to the test of time, is equally important, because you're not talking about doing something and then, if it doesn't work, we can always part ways. This is huge. It is about people. It is about structures. It is about systems. And most importantly, it's about all your stakeholders, your beneficiaries. So, yes, the danger there is that if we, which we have to guard against, is if these intermediaries, the financial and legal kind, start to drive the process, because it makes them more money, because they've got a motive, then we could go down the wrong path. But thanks for raising that.
Yeah. So, other questions? I think there's one over there.
Yeah, hi.
Yes,
so
go ahead.
I'm coming from a wealth management space, so from the funding side. And I don't know which of the teams would be the right to answer this, but I was just hearing at both the arguments. I was thinking that if we look at collaboration or mergers, the medium-sized NGOs becoming bigger and the platforms giving them more visibility, and so the scale increases and all of that. But in this whole process, I'm meeting a lot of these small NGOs and individual small institutions. Are they losing their visibility towards the funding organizations, and are they finding it more difficult to be more visible and get access to funds? Because of the platforms and because of the branding and because of the scale, people are looking at bigger players and larger players because they're more structured and they're easy to see and get reports. But in this whole process, are the smaller ones really getting lost in this whole formal philanthropy structure or process, be it collaborative or be it mergers? Yeah.
So, I think it's true that the larger ones perhaps get more voice and more market share and more visibility. But I don't think that's a bad thing. So I think it is true that the challenge in India, and not only in India, but even in the US and in other countries, that NGOs and NGOs in general or nonprofits tend to be small, and there are very, very few big ones. And I think the general view is that having scale and big ones is useful, but because they can then bring together a set of skills and capabilities that can drive change at scale. So I think the challenge today is, even though what you're saying is true, that organizations tend, the larger ones get more market share, the challenge is there are not enough of those large organizations. To find NGOs who are more than $100 million in revenue a year, nearly impossible. Whereas if you want to find companies which are more than $100 million, you'll find zillions of them. So I think we need to find, in fact, ways to make our NGO systems bigger and better, but it's not easy, and I don't think M&A is a viable way to do it, but we have to solve that problem of how to make NGOs larger.
I would just like to add to that. So the collaboration method actually, it also helps in channelizing funding to small organizations. Because of partnership, you are able to, you have access to certain resources which you would not have had if you are not the partner. Like, so I saw that in Childline, as well as I have seen that in ARMMAN, that many of the small community-based organizations were able to sustain themselves longer, were able to improve their processes and systems, became more professional by associating with a slightly bigger and professional organization. So actually it works well for both.
So I'd just like to make a bit of a comment and a question. You know, I think this debate between yes or no is probably a little not very applicable in the non-profit sector. I've been a serial entrepreneur in the profit sector and don't want to draw examples from that. But even in non-profit, with whom I've had limited exposure, I think when non-profits begin, they are often and very usually begun by charismatic founders with a tremendously innovative vision in some local communities, and then they scale up, they bring in various partners, collaborations, and that's the way to go. But there comes a point when the charisma begins to wear off, the founders begin to get into other aspects of life, their circumstances change. Then you need a long-lasting institution, which is not what this institution started as. And maybe that's the time when you want to create much more multiplied social impact, that you would need to bring together not only collaborations, because that may not be strong enough. There are too many personalities involved, and therefore potentially ego battles. I think that's the time when you need a much larger, scalable, unified merger, if I might use that expression. And so I don't think it's a question of either or, so I don't know if you have any comments on that.
No, it's never a question of either or. I think it is both. But the question that was asked, and I think that is perhaps the crying need, is that we need an intermediary, an enlightened intermediary. I think Dasra's theme has been that, India needs to give more and more. And, we have so many fragmented NGOs, and that is perhaps true all over the world. So if we have more givers, the small guys, either they'll get money or they will have. But I think the most important, this growth of this sector will be driven by donors, large NGOs that can help utilize whether through collaboration or otherwise through mergers, impact in this sector, and very importantly, this intermediary that will make that happen. I think it's a very important, and it has to be not an investment banker of any kind.
One last question.
Here.
Yes.
Question here.
Sorry, can we get the mic over here? Arun, thank you.
So I had a question that came off something you said, Alkesh, which is that across the world.
Who, me or
Alkesh? I mean, you could respond.
No.
I mean, it's just something that sparked.
Let him. He's the winner anyway.
No. Something that sparked. Something that he said that sparked it. Across the world, not-for-profit organizations are not new, or civil society organizations are not new, but across the world, they tend to be small and very diverse. Whenever such things persist, there must be good reasons why they persist, and the good reasons may not all be down to egos and things like that. So I was wondering if you had any reflections on why this might actually, why time is telling us, and why time keeps telling us that small, diverse, large numbers may be interesting solutions. I mean, there might be something there which is more than inefficiency. I mean, it's almost the way it is, and why would that be? I mean, it'd be interesting to hear reflections on it.
Yeah. So, you know, you could argue that maybe it's because, as you're saying, the non-profit sector is in a way has different goals, aspirations than the profit sector, and therefore small is beautiful in the non-profit sector, and there's nothing wrong with that. Though I'm not in that camp, and I'm skeptical of that's why most NGOs remain small. Yeah, and I think it's because, you know, in the profit world, you have revenues, you have profits, so you can grow. I mean, you grow through reinvesting profits. Here, there are no profits to be reinvested. Here, there's no revenue, so you can't come up with a product and make $1 billion and grow. So it's just tough for non-profits to grow. That's my view.
Sorry, we have one last question. The mic has already been given to somebody. Go ahead.
Hello.
Hi. I don't think anyone's answered how small NGOs, and most of us are, you know, trusts. How does a trust merge with another trust? You can't. Legally, how is this possible?
So I just did some research yesterday. I do not know too well, but it seems it's easy, companies to company, society to society, and trust also. Like if they are in the furthering of the same cause, legally it's allowed. But there has to be mission alignment. So yeah, their objects cannot be too different. There has to be. So of course, while I was talking about against M&A, but when you are going to be working with an organization, ideal would be that you should have collaborated for some time. Then and only you should be looking at if you have vision alignment, if you have buy-in of stakeholders, internal and external. And if you have done all your preparation, then only you should be looking at merging or joining another organization. The trust allows that. It will take some time. You have to follow a few processes, but legally it's allowed.
Okay, thank you guys, first of all, the audience, for being so participatory. I apologize, there were 5 other hands up, but we don't have time to get to that. I want to first show the results of the pre-debate. Where did we think we stand? And then, of course, where the results finally got us, i.e., which debate team won. Great. So clearly, Geetanjali's bribe to Pravin Bhai
has
worked. Pravin Bhai, you should have bribed me from that, and then you could have. We have the polling booth in the back. That's where this all sits. Thank you, participants, for making this engaging, enlightened. Clearly, there is no black and white, but hopefully this gave us a sense of what it looks like to have M&A activity, and I think more importantly, as the panelists said, funding for this is limited, but Pravin Bhai is really willing to fund anyone who wants to do M&A in this space. So speak to him afterwards, and he has a checkbook in hand. Thank you so much.
I am leaving just now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.